This is a conversation with John Flavell for the Kentucky Marriage Equality and Religious Liberty Oral History Project. We are in Studio A of Breckenridge Hall on Morehead State's campus located in Round County, Kentucky. It is 1:11 p.m. on Thursday, March 9th, 2017. My name is Ricky Nelson. So, Mr. Flavell, if you could just start by telling me where you were born and where you grew up.
I was born in El Paso, Texas, but I grew up in a military family, so it's actually all over.
Okay, and can you tell me a little bit about some of your childhood experiences, specifically your religious upbringing, or if you had any, or if you were raised to believe certain things?
Religious upbringing was not very much. Moving from place to place as a kid in a military family, you learn how to bond quickly and how to judge people to the point, do you want to be around them or not be around them, quite quickly. And we were taught tolerance, believe it or not, in these Department of Defense schools. We were taught tolerance at a very early age.
Okay. And can you tell me your current occupation?
I am still sometimes a full-time journalist, and I'm on faculty here full-time.
All right, so I'm going to ask you about your views on marriage equality.
Okay.
Are you pro-marriage equality, or are you against marriage equality?
I'm pro.
Pro, could you tell me why?
It doesn't really matter. The excuse of it damaging a traditional marriage just doesn't hold up.
Okay.
Now, I have to explain here at this point that when covering these events as a journalist, I am not pro or against. When I say that I'm pro, I'm not the kind of pro-marriage equality person who would go out and protest or rally one way or the other.
Okay. What was your reaction when you heard about the marriage equality law?
Which one?
The one that the Supreme Court passed that said marriage equality was legal all over the U.S.
I wasn't ecstatic, and I wasn't disappointed either way.
Okay. What was your reaction when you heard that Kim Davis, the county clerk here in Round County, was refusing marriage licenses to same-sex and straight couples because of this law?
Well, according to the law and the way the Constitution works, and in fact the way Judge Bunning had dealt with this before, you can't put a blanket on something and over the whole thing, and then and use that as an excuse to get what you want about same-sex couples, for example. So we knew that wasn't going to work, and also knew or realized quickly it would be going to federal court.
Okay, and you covered the Kim Davis story as a journalist.
Yeah, a journalist and a teacher, yeah.
Yeah. So could you tell me the preparations that you had to make to get ready to cover the story? As in, did you know that there were going to be as many media outlets there that there were? And so maybe some of the obstacles that you faced.
Well, the obstacles that we faced are when you're a journalist working and the Constitution is being played out in your front yard. It's different than somebody parachuting in from New York or Philadelphia. You have to kind of balance out how you cover it and recognize that what's happening is happening in your own territory. And it is different than covering it from far away or showing up from far away. You have to be careful of the stereotypes. You have to be careful of just not letting your own emotions get in the way. I've worked here for 35 years as a journalist, and I've done pretty well at getting people to understand I'm not on one side or the other. Some of them don't appreciate that at all, but that's the way it has to be. And some of them will say it's unfortunate, but it's not. I think it's very fortunate. So the only preparations I had here was to not jump to conclusions because I had friends on both sides.
What was the courthouse like the day that you were there?
The first couple of times it was local groups. They weren't yet really yelling or screaming at each other. In fact, the photography, looking over some of the things, knowing that I was going to be here today, Looked at some of the photographs last night, and it was very kind of calm and collected. It's when outside groups came in that it started getting loud. So basically, people from far away came here to yell at each other. And that's what we noticed, and that became part of the reporting. And that's something that, being a local journalist, we would recognize.
Did you feel when the outside groups came, were you intimidated at all by any of the protests?
No.
Did you feel that any of the protests were going to get out of hand?
No. I think that they were more bark than bite.
Do you know around an estimated how many media outlets were there?
Oh, I think one day we counted 10.
10 media outlets all
And there were some that we didn't know or we didn't see. They weren't hidden, but they weren't making a big play about it.
How many were all in her office all at once at one time?
Oh, God, it could have been 24.
And it was crowded? Was it difficult to get?
It was crowded. It was difficult to work around. There were some who were not actually, I think, objective journalists. They were there also to be activists, which is fine. However, it sort of gets in the way of what I want to do or what I need to do. But it was crowded. It was meant to be crowded. I mean, it was just going to happen that way. But I don't think anybody was shoving or hurting anyone.
Could you tell me about how Kim Davis reacted to all of those media outlets being there?
I think Kim Davis reacted at first. She didn't want them being in there, but she can't keep them out. In fact, that was a challenge on one day. I get along with her fine, but her son Nathan tried to keep us out one day, and I did the challenge. I said, well, you call the police or I'll call the police, but we're coming in. And that settled it. And the sheriff was there just to make sure things didn't get out of hand, but he was not taking orders from her to get us out. So he understood what was happening.
Being a journalist and having covered many, many stories, do you think that the media coverage that this specific event received was appropriate? Is it normal for something like this to get that much attention?
It is normal, and it is appropriate whenever you have the Constitution playing out somewhere in a place like this, all stereotypes aside about religion or about same-sex marriage or anything. It's the Constitution being played out, causing a reaction in the city. It is appropriate.
Did you think that there was anything wrong about the way that some of the media outlets were portraying Kim Davis?
I think that some of them went a little bit too far with the stereotype. I also think that there was some crossover into that gray area of activism. There were some who came here to write about hate, to write about an experience that they weren't not having. So they would show up from San Francisco, for example. There was some bloggers that showed up, and they made a big to-do about being denied a marriage license, when in fact they were already married in California. So it didn't really matter. They were here to create the story they wanted to write, and that is a problem for us.
Do you agree, this is personally and not as a journalist, do you agree with Kim Davis's decision to refuse the marriage licenses? I agree with Kim Davis's decision to stand on a challenge that she agreed with. I don't know that she would have won. In fact, there's many indications that she wouldn't have won. And because I'm not involved one way or the other, I'm not sure that we hem and haw about this one, because if I tell you what I think personally, then it does cross over into what I do professionally. And people do hold that against me later down the road. They hold that against me if this ever comes up again, and it could. Well, you truly believe this and you truly believe that would be the quote, and that's going to affect the way that I cover it, and I don't think it does. Journalists have to look at this completely different. We have to step back and look at the whole thing before we go in and get close-ups or quotes or whatever, interviews, for example. And it's very difficult for us to do if we give ground on a personal note
on the personally the way that we feel, we end up being accused by one side or the other. Now, being objective doesn't always solve that, but being objective certainly keeps me and keeps us journalists in the role that we're supposed to play. I'm going to have to cough. Go ahead.
Were you surprised at all that Kim Davis was jailed for refusing to issue marriage licenses?
No, I wasn't surprised at that because Judge Bunny's a pretty conservative judge, and federal judges have a lot of power. It's one of those things. I don't know if they like hearing me say this. It's the only place where a democracy has a complete monarchy within that one little room. Everything that happens in there is their word and their law. So I think he was trying to push her. I think he maybe a little too hard, a little too harsh about it. Didn't surprise me. He just as surprisingly let her go early.
Now her hearing was in Ashland, and
Part
there
of it,
were
yeah. Mm-hmm.
protests down there. Were you there for any
Yep,
of that?
I was there.
Could you tell me what that environment was like?
Same environment. What you have is, although that there were some Ashland churches and groups that were rallying, protesting, however you want to approach it, there were a lot of outside people who showed up there. Again, it's a lot of outside people yelling at each other. And again, nobody was hurt, nobody was threatened. I don't want to say it was peaceful because it was loud, but it was nonviolent.
What was your reaction when Kim Davis was released so soon? Was it something that you expected?
When she was what?
Released from jail?
No, because Huckabee was there, Tim Cruz was there. We did not expect her to come out. And I was surprised. And that was probably the largest group of people I'd been in during this whole time, was at the jail in Carter County.
Okay. We're going to move on and talk about Westboro Baptist Church.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Did you get any notification in advance when they were going to be coming to Morehead State University?
Yeah, I think I got a day or two. And they do, procedurally and constitutionally, they're very thorough. They will call ahead and tell you they're coming. And sometimes that's to intimidate and cause some sort of reaction to the people who are here. And if they cause that, they think or they believe they've done their job, whether they show up really or not.
Did you go and cover or write a story or take pictures
I made
of
pictures,
their
yeah.
protest?
I made pictures, yeah.
Could you tell me what their protest was like? So maybe some of the things that
Well,
you've heard and what they were discussing.
The protest, and we've covered this before, 2002, at Boyd County High School. Same judge was involved with a group wanted, a homosexual group or a gay group, I'm not sure what's proper these days, wanted to use facilities at the high school after hours. Same thing, there was a blanket, nobody gets to use facilities after hours, and the judge, having just been appointed, wasn't going to put up with that. So Westboro showed up en masse, and a lot more people that showed up here. There weren't very many people here. What you have to learn with that group not to react to what the visual that they show you, what they want you to see. They won't yell, they won't intimidate, they won't even point their fingers at you, they won't preach to you. They'll just silently, usually, protest. And it's what's written. God hates fags, so-and-so's going to hell. This goes on and on and on. And they're hoping that you are, as an audience or a reactionary group, would react and intimidate, or feel intimidated and feel the need to come over and confront them. They're very good at that. They're very good at not starting a confrontation.
Do you think the events of the protests that happened with Kim Davis, with Westboro, with everything that happened in Rowan County specifically, do you think these events brought the community closer together or tore it farther apart? I
think it brought it closer together. And I say that because at the beginning of this, I would see people, some yelling, who were from here, not very much, but some yelling, and some accusing. But if you go to Kroger that night, they're in the aisle talking about what they're going to take to church lunch in the next day. When Westboro said that they were coming, the two groups, not even formal groups, but they began calling each other. We know this because we interviewed about it. They began calling each other and say, we're just going to stay away. Westboro kind of was there were several turning points before that, but Westboro finally put a cap on it. Says we're not, as a community, we're not going to yell at each other anymore. And we're just going to let it ride out legally and see what happens. And I think it brought them closer together.
Do you think that the debate over religious liberty and marriage equality as a whole is over?
I think the same-sex marriage issue is over. This was not played out to a legal conclusion. The governor removed that when he said that she did not have to have her name on a license. So it could still come up. It could still come up because it wasn't allowed to play itself out to an ultimate decision.
Okay. And lastly, do you have any other comments or thoughts that you'd like to add?
Just that I thought the students that we have here, both in the television area and in the print media, did very, very, very well for themselves by learning how to be objective, learning how to not let their emotions of the moment get caught up in it. They learned how to stand back when they should, but they learned how to hold their ground. I also noticed, and it goes back to the question about how we journalists have to approach this. There are a lot of pictures in my office, but one of them's Barack Obama, and when people walk in, it's a rather large one that I made when he was campaigning for president. And people say, well, you must really like Barack Obama. Not the issue. The issue is it's a good photograph of Barack Obama. Another one is a photo of Kim Davis that Sam Fangman took, one of our students here. And it showed up on the front page all over the country. Front pages all over the country from inside where she has her hands up. It's just a great photograph. And there was a faculty member at our university in my office the other day who saw that and said, how can you look at that every day? Because he obviously hated Kim Davis. I said, it's a great photograph of Kim Davis, and I had to trade a photograph for a photograph to get that picture. And every day I'm reminded of what a great job our students did by looking at that picture. So I'm not, I guess I really don't have a feeling one way or another. I feel it's just going to play out and hopefully be right. But we have to approach things differently, and when people tell me about those pictures and how can you stand to look at that, or you must really like Barack Obama, it's not about whether or not I like or don't like him, it's about doing very, very good reporting, and I think that's what our students did here.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Great, thank you.